everyone at Inc. International. My name is Monica Washington, and I am an AP English and English teacher here at Texas High School in Texarkana, Texas. Welcome to my classroom. I have the honor this year as serving the state as the 2014 State Teacher of the Year, and with that honor comes the opportunity for me to travel the state, travel my area, and speak to teachers and motivate them and give them some advice on some of the things that I've done and what my career has been like. And hopefully in that process it helps them to be able to teach another day. Sometimes you just need that one word to teach another day. So I wanted to just share with you a few things that I say to teachers when I go out and travel and meet them. I like to tell them, first of all, that the plan that we all have is that we're going to go to college. We love learning. We get there, we love it, and we love kids. We put those two things together and we decide, I think I want to be a teacher. I want to walk into the classroom and I want to inspire somebody else to love learning just as much as I do. And we make it there, we make it to our classrooms, and we assume automatically that our kids will love us just as much as we love them automatically. And we get our hearts broken really quickly because we realize that they don't love us, and it's a lot of times they don't even like us. They walk in and they see us, there's this wall, this teacher wall, that they immediately see that you don't know me, you're a teacher, and there's nothing that you can do to make me believe that you're on my level. And so I didn't know that walking into my first classroom in Memphis City Schools. I thought that they would love learning automatically, that they would want me to teach them how to write, and everything was going to be hunky-dory and great. And after being cursed out and robbed and all kinds of other things, I realized that I was trying to be a teacher first, and they tell you in college that that's the main thing, but that's not the main thing. And so I learned through trial and error that the best thing about teaching, the way to be a great teacher, is to not be a teacher first. That doesn't make a lot of sense to people who aren't teachers, but those people who are teachers and they're good at it understand that in order to be a great teacher, you have to be a great something else before you can be a great teacher. And so what I realized quickly is that I needed to get to know them, because if I just talk at them, I talk to them, then I wasn't really teaching them. And so what I found was that I started looking at them as little travelers. They're coming from my class this year to this class next year, and they've been, I don't know, in whoever's room before they came to me. And so along the way, they've gotten a little bit of something from this teacher, a little bit of something from that teacher, and then I hope they get a lot of something from me. And as teachers, we hope that we can completely change every kid's life and change the world in the process, but that doesn't always happen, but we do try. And so what I started doing was, these are little travelers, and they each have with them a suitcase. And so they travel with these different suitcases, and some of them are full because they have the support at home, they have food at home, they have exactly what they need. They go home, they're safe, they're secure, somebody's helping them with their homework. So I can then, that kid with that full suitcase, then they're receptive to talking about verbs and nouns and everything else with me. But that kid who walks in my room who has a fairly empty suitcase and the wheels are falling off the suitcase and everything else is wrong with the suitcase and it's basically empty, they're going to need me to put some stuff in the suitcase that perhaps will allow them to then listen to me about a subject, about a verb, about an essay. Because until I realize what they don't have, there is no way that I can teach them. And so my first goal is to get to know who they are as people. What are they interested in? What is it that they need? What are they lacking? And you don't always find those things out right away. You can't find them out on an interest inventory. You have to find them out by constantly engaging them in discussion. And so what I do is I look at them, I talk to them, I ask them questions, I talk about me, and I figure it out. I figure them out. I'm a people watcher, suitcase packer, then an English teacher. And that's what has enabled me to become Teacher of the Year, or it doesn't matter if you ever become Teacher of the Year, but that's what has allowed me to have a successful career, is that I see them as people first and students second. And I've packed, I hope, a lot of suitcases over my 17 years as a teacher. This is year 17 for me. Recently, I had a student who was in a lot of trouble, but he would respond to me, and he would listen to me. and we were about to read a book, and it was our first novel of the year, and he was a little reluctant because he'd never read a book before. He said nobody had read to him, and he definitely had never sat down and read a book by himself. And so I started going to get little thin, high interest books, and I said, hey Terry, what about this book right here? You know, it's about this. You told me you like this. What about this book? And he would read it. I read that book. You got something else like that? And then I would slip him another book, and I would slip him another book. And then my heart got broken because he eventually, after a month or so of doing that, he completely stopped coming to school. And I didn't know where he went, and I looked for him, couldn't really find out what happened with him. And so he comes back to school about 3 months later, and he said that he had gone somewhere and got in trouble and went to jail. And in the process, he said, you know, I could have sat there and done nothing, but I sat there and I asked him for books. And so while I was gone, I was still reading the books you gave me, and I read some other books that they had, and, you know, I never read so many books in my life. And so had I not realized what he was lacking, and I hope that I have inspired him to now become a reader, to become a learner. But had I not looked at him as a person first, I would not have been able to teach him. So that was one little nugget I dropped in his suitcase. And I hope that as he goes to the next person, the next suitcase packer will put the next thing in there that he can build upon, and the next thing. And so often when we take our education classes, they talk about, you know, loving the students and, you know, being positive, and that's all well and good. But sometimes what needs to go in the suitcase is some tough love. Sometimes you have to say, you must think I'm crazy. You do think I'm crazy, and you have to let them think that you are crazy. And I say that to mean that sometimes they have to realize that I am a teacher, but let me just be real with you for a second. And I've had to pull some kids aside and just say, do you know you're being a jerk right now? You're being a real jerk right now, and you're failing right now. Though I'm not giving you a chance after a chance after chance, I'm going to give you an F this time. I had another student, Tanner, who, call him his name, I have his permission, but he was the class, not the class clown, but the class cynic. And every single thing that he said was negative. And every time he spoke, everybody rolled their eyes because they knew whatever he had to say was negative. And I pulled him aside one day and I said, do you realize nobody likes you? Do you realize nobody likes you? You're a likable person, but do you realize they don't like you? When you speak, people roll their eyes. Why are you so negative? And I said, you're presenting yourself as a jerk. You have this wall up. Tell me what's behind the wall. And he just burst into tears. And he started telling me about some of the things that were behind the wall. About, you know, not having anybody to put that firm hand down for him. Not having somebody to point out his flaws to him. And he thanked me for what he called, thank you for ridiculing me. I needed to be ridiculed, but I wasn't ridiculing him. I was putting what he was doing in the light. I said, you're better than that. I see you as a better person than that, a better student than that. You're failing right now because you're lazy. And so we talked about it, and he cried about it. And at the end, he asked if I would give him bonus points so he could not get the F. But I gave him the F anyway because that was what he needed in his suitcase. He needed that tough love in his suitcase. And he graduated, and he came back and he told me, he said, you know, that was the best, that was the only and the best F I ever got in my life. I've never gotten an F before, but I'm so glad I got that F out of your class, because getting that F in your class and have you call me out like you called me out made me mad at first, but it really showed me that I did have this front that I was putting on. So, and there are so many kids that I've had to just give some tough love to. Even after they've done me wrong and cursed me out and everything else, sometimes they just still needed me to give them that tough love, and sometimes maybe that sweet love. And it's just a case-by-case basis. You look at that kid and you see what has to go in the suitcase. Sometimes it's that confidence in taking a risk. Sometimes we have brilliant kids who don't look like brilliant kids. They sit in our class, their hair may be long, and they may not look like everybody else, but behind that facade, behind that image, there is brilliance. And so we need to look for ways as teachers to tap into that brilliance, to give that kid the opportunity to shine, to say something, to be good at something, to excel at something, and then to take that risk. And then after they take that risk, they get, it's almost like an adrenaline rush. I took a risk, now let me take another risk. And I took that risk and I got better, let me try this again. I had a student like that recently who basically was hiding behind a wall of hair and wouldn't ever really speak. but every now and then he would peek to the side and just kind of look or smile a little bit. So I knew what we were talking about in class was interesting to him, but he never really wanted to share. So I started to prod after class and say, hey, what did you think about this? What did you think about that? Then the next day I would come back and say, yeah, I was talking to Jordan, and Jordan said blah, blah, blah. And the class went, what? Jordan said that? Shh, boy. And so he got confident and started to share. And by the end of class, the end of the year, he wanted to get up and address the class. He wanted to get up and say what he had learned and how the class had totally transformed his life. And so now he wants to be a teacher because he found his voice. And these are his words. He found his voice through this class because I realized that he needed somebody to listen to him. I realized that there was something great in him and that he was hiding it. And so he basically found his voice verbally and through writing. He is one of the most brilliant writers I've ever met. If I wrote like this kid at the 11th grade, I don't know where I would be right now. I would be a novelist. But that is our challenge, to watch these little travelers walk in our rooms and see what kind of suitcase do they have, how full is it, put in what they need first, and once you do that, you can teach them anything. But if you look at them as objects that you're talking to, teaching at, there is nothing that you will ever be able to put in their suitcase. You have to bring yourself down and make yourself a real person to them and talk about the stuff you didn't have in your suitcase. I tell them all the time about being in an environment where we were put out of the house, where we didn't have electricity, where I had a crack addicted stepfather, and having to go through that and having things that were lacking for me. There were people who dropped things in my suitcase along the way, and eventually I was able to pull it all together and get going to where I needed to get. So once we look at our kids like that and see their faults and see that they're not perfect people yet. I teach English and I look at kids as they're a rough draft of themselves. Some of them are a little rougher than others, but they're a rough draft of themselves, and they are going to get better. And if I can drop that one thing, or those two things, those three things, they're at least better now than they were when they walked in the door with that suitcase. And so our challenge as teachers is to be able to discipline them without belittling them and making them feel like they're less than. To empower them to take charge of their learning while you still maintain control. But they think that they have the power, but you still have the control, but you make them feel like they're empowered. And also to make concessions for them, to say, okay, I understand that sometimes the lights are out. My lights have been out too. Yes, you can bring it back tomorrow, but don't wallow in excuses. Don't let it happen again. Next time, let's figure out a way to make it work. And so, as we call ourselves teachers, as we see ourselves as teachers, the most important thing that we need to do first is see ourselves as suitcase packers, as people who place items in and definitely not take items out. We are here to grow good people. Yes, I want my students to be good English teachers, but English students rather, and if they become English teachers, that's good too. But I want them to be good at English, write well, speak well. That's all well and good. First and foremost, I want them to be good people, and I have to be a good person. And once they see that in me, and I see what they're missing, we make that connection. I can teach them the math, I can teach them the English, I can teach them the science, because I dropped something in, and now they're better than what they were when they walked in. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you for the opportunity.